Welcome everybody to our budget meeting. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great team effort. Again, welcome everyone. I'd like a motion to enter into an open meeting of the Budget Committee. I'll take a motion, Mrs. Nardolillo, and a second. I have to see his hand, Mrs. Grinnell, and all in favor. Thank you very much. Once again, I'd like to introduce our budget co-chairs. It's Mrs. Mary Nardolillo and Mr. Ron Vondell. And I guess we can turn it over right away to Mr. Kaur.
Now, thank you, Mrs. Harrison, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's budget planning meeting. This is the evening where we, again, review the context for individuals who may be attending for the first time. Also, just to review, because it's important always to look at our context, and there are some things that do change from week to week in our context. So we have our presentation up on the screen. So tonight we will be reviewing the context. We'll be taking a look at staffing. We'll look at the steps that we took to close our budgetary gap. We'll be looking at our tax cap. We'll be looking at our expenditure budget and our revenue budget. We'll be talking about the voting process for this year, which is on all absentee ballot. And we will have our calendar at the end, okay, where we'll show, the upcoming meetings, including our adoption of the budget, which will be coming up on the 18th of May, our Meet the Candidates and Budget Forum, and of course, our voting date on June the 9th. So we have an ambitious agenda. We'll also be reviewing right at the end too. We'll be taking a look at, some of the highlights of what is contained in this budget and where we ended up this year. So if we look at the first slide here, I just want to pause for a moment where in the next slide will say questions or comments. So we could just go to that and just pause on that. If you have a question or a comment to make, you can email it to communications@ncolonie.org. And I'll give you some, our audience a chance to copy that down. And certainly, we also at the end tonight, we have to anticipate that, there is a bit of a lag time between the entering of a question and when it's actually received. So, we want to make sure that, like all good teachers, we practice wait time here so that we make sure that we have a chance to select our questions at the end. Okay, so again, it's communications@ncolonie.org. Okay, we start every budget meeting with our mission, and I think as we get closer to budget presentation, the mission becomes all the more important, and especially in times where we are challenged by our work. We always have to focus on what we do for our students. So when we look at that, and I'm going to read that in its entirety tonight, all students are provided with the opportunity and necessary support to engage in relevant, challenging work which contributes to their academic and social growth and development. So in terms of doing the best we can by our students, we realize that when we educate the student, we educate every aspect of their existence, if you will, their academic, their growth, their social growth and development. So mental health, socialization, all are extremely important, and we have been challenged in these times to meet these goals and needs. But I think the spirit of our district and the spirit of the folks who work here, which leads us to the second bullet, that spirit is undaunted, okay, by difficult times. And, we realize more than ever okay, the importance of an education and the importance of relationships and the importance of the adults who have a very meaningful role in the lives of our students. So when we look at that, we have to realize that developing our staff, that all staff, teachers, and administrators are part of a larger learning community working together to build collective capacity in order to provide a high quality, relevant, equitable education for all. That, it now is the time to really focus on these two bullet points and to uh, do the very best we can in a challenging time where resources are increasingly scarce to, realize the two important aspects of these bullets. Our students, first and foremost, and the people who work with our students and provide the very important service of education. So if we go to the next slide, we'll focus on the pillars. We've mentioned before that, our pillars revolve around academic excellence, equity, and social emotional health. So when we look at that, it's, how do our decisions, lead to academic excellence and equity for all students and social emotional health? How do we realize that equity means not giving everybody the same, but providing our students what they need, and for each student that is different. And we look at that social emotional health component right now when we realize, that in this time of the COVID-19 pandemic, we become acutely aware of the social emotional needs of our students, of our families, and also of our staff, the adults who work with them. This has been a difficult time for all. Um, you know, um, and our staff has pursued this with courage, with compassion and commitment. Um, but the realization of the toll that this has taken on our entire community is acute, and so we enter into our budget with these three pillars very much at the forefront of our planning. So if we could go to the next slide. So this is a slide that we've had showed before, but I think it does provide context. As I said, it's a review for those of you who have been with us, and it may provide added or new context for those of us who are with us for the first time this evening. We were scheduled initially to receive $12,588,865 in foundation aid. And that was actually that was good news to us. That was $463,000 more than last year's allocation. And typically in a budget year, that amount increases as a legislator goes through and passes a budget. But post COVID-19, foundation aid was held flat. So it was held flat at last year's amount, $12,125,223. And so instead of increasing the 463,000, the actual 463,000 was cut at that stage of the budget. So that compounded an existing difficult situation. But the story is not over there, as we well know. So if we could take a look at the next slide. And so now we deal with a period of great uncertainty. And in periods of uncertainty, people want answers and they expect answers. But, the chain of uncertainty starts from really from the top and, continues down through us. So this is a time of great uncertainty, and we have to accept that fact, and we have to live with that, and we have to do the best to provide leadership during that time. So that means when we make decisions and we make budget decisions, we make them on the information that we have at the time. And yet, we exercise humility, flexibility to go through this and admit, well, things have changed. And so we're going to change our situation here or our response to a situation because the set of facts by which we make such decisions are now different. And so we will make those adjustments accordingly. So in this post-COVID-19 reality, and I know I've been through this before, but again, I think it's important to emphasize this. The director of budget has been authorized to make periodic adjustments throughout the year. And, essentially the goal of the state of New York is to make sure that the state general fund remains balanced. And so periodically, and that represents what we see in bullet 3 here. So the periodic period would be 4 measurement periods. One ended on April 30th. The next one will end on June 30th. It will measure the period May 1 to June 30. The fourth one will measure July 1 to December 31. And the last one for this fiscal year will measure January 1 to March 31. So during this measurement period, and I'm going to refer to the second bullet now, the budget director is authorized if revenues fall short or below 99% of estimates, or if actual disbursements, spending exceeds the budgeted amount, goes over 101%, then adjustments must be made. And so therefore, we had to wait until the first measurement period has passed. Well, not only are we waiting until after the first measurement period, but we are actually awaiting, and we can move on to the next slide now. We are actually waiting for an additional cut that would be even more drastic. So Congress right now is in the process of beginning debate on another stimulus bill. There was a bill that was passed. There have been a couple of bills that have been passed. None of these stimulus bills had direct aid to, the most recent one did not have direct aid to schools and localities. And that was hoped for in that bill. So the problem the state faces is that we now have a significant deficit. We may have additional reductions in state aid. So the governor has vacillated between it being 10% to 20% reductions in state aid. His most recent pronouncement was assume a 20% reduction in state aid. Now, we might have some specifics on this tomorrow, but we have to go forward with our budget process. So we need to assume that throughout the year, we could experience an additional 20% cut for state aid. So when we translate this into revenue dollars that the district anticipated receiving from the state of New York, this represented an additional loss of $2.4 million. So we are using this, we are fixed on this, and I know we raised, what were we going to use and what were we going to be guided by? We're guided by a 20% loss in foundation aid. So that's a loss of 2.4 million as our current revenue assumption. Now, the United States Congress, a bill has been introduced in the House of Representatives. And of course, we know from our civics classes that bills have to pass both houses and be signed by the President of the United States before they become law. So Congress is currently working on this. There's a lot of advocacy on behalf of the state, and that includes states in general. So 50 state governors, regardless of political party, and the New York State congressional delegation in its entirety, regardless of political affiliation, are advocating for an additional stimulus. And so the prospect still, there is debate, there is disagreement, there is discussion, there's contentiousness around this. So it's uncertain right now. So we can't assume that, the cavalry's coming to aid us. We have to assume that we are going to not have a stimulus bill. And if we do, then we're better off on that. So if we could go to the next slide, and I'm sorry for not queuing that in. So the next slide is this. So when we budget, we budget in a climate of uncertainty. And so, I just mentioned the uncertainty in state aid, state revenue. There is also uncertainty in the unknown costs associated with reopening schools in a manner that is consistent with health regulations post-COVID-19. So be assured, okay, that we are working internally as a district, but really, what at the end of the day, this is bigger than North Colonie, and it will require a regional and a state solution. So we are taking the lead in the various aspects of this and joining with our partners in the Capital Region BOCES, the 24 schools of the Capital Region, to work together to come up with a plan that addresses all components of reopening schools in September if we are under specific regulations that would be directed by, and as you can see there in the second bullet, the Center for Disease Control, the New York State Department of Health, the New York State Education Department, and of course our local Department of Health and the governor's office. And so we will be working regionally, and we will determine the steps we need to take and the associated costs in regard to, and this is not a comprehensive list, but this gives you a sense here of what the considerations are. So, our obligations to provide personal protective equipment to students and staff, the impact of social distancing on transportation and in classrooms. If students have to be distanced 6 feet in a classroom, obviously we can't fill our classrooms to capacity anymore. In fact, we've done studies on it in other school districts. It ranges to a little less than half to about half capacity with social distancing. So, these are big problems that we are going to have to work on, and they will require regional solutions as well. Proper sanitation of all classroom buses, etc., on a daily basis. There are specific cleaning protocols, deep cleaning protocols prescribed by the CDC. So that will require perhaps additional staff. That will perhaps require new cleaning materials and equipment. So, we have to be thinking about that and thinking ahead. And, we have to take a look at, it's a difficult time, and the biggest expense in our budget is personnel because we are a people business. Quite honestly, the service of education is, of course, driven by teachers, by support staff, by principals, administrators, by the wonderful staff who drives our students to school, feeds them, cares for them in the health office. So it's a people-intensive business. And now is the time here where, when we look at, what we've gone through since the middle of March, students will need instructional support. Students will need support for mental health, and students will need, appropriate cleaning and safety protocols put into effect. Then that means equipment and the staff to do them. So basically, in this context for budget, it's likely that the impact of COVID-19 will extend well into next year and well beyond that. So this year, the state is forecasting a budget gap of at least 13 billion. The Great Recession, it was somewhere around 10 billion. 13 billion might grow. We know that the federal stimulus package, a new federal stimulus package with a direct aid to states, municipalities, and schools, that's uncertain. We don't know whether that will be here. And, this is a daunting prediction here, but this budget year most likely will be better than next budget year. So we have to take a look at that, and we have to take that into consideration. So the rates for the teachers' retirement system and the employees' retirement system have already set, and they have a 5-year look back at the financial markets. So the last 5 years, there's that 5th year coming off, which was a pretty good year for the markets, and that's going to be replaced by this year, which will not be a very good year. We do have, okay, and this is a benefit. We do have some fiscal savings from the closure, which will be substantial and which we will have to factor in planning to meet the needs of reduced revenue from the state, in planning to meet expenses for planning for COVID, post-COVID-19, and also to provide relief to our taxpayers as well. We are also very fortunate this year. So this is the year, okay, if you look at those 3 bullets there, the fact that TRS and ERS were set, and they were set at a very manageable rate, that we had fiscal savings from the closure, and we had an unprecedented number of retirements. We had actually a perfect storm there, if you will, of good fortune. And that good fortune has enabled us to help realize our budgetary goals. But we have to begin to look at this budget really as phase 1 of a multi-year budgetary cycle. And so, we do have to make changes, and we do have to do them in a way that is good for our students, preserves staffing as best we can, and looks forward to the future, and doesn't exhaust all our opportunities to make changes and to realize efficiencies as we go forward. Look at the next slide.
Excuse me, Mr. Kaur.
Yes.
I just wanted to let you know we are having some technical difficulties with the live stream. So if people out there are watching and the live stream is going a little bit in and out, if it goes out, if they just refresh in their browser, it will come back up. We're working on it, but we are aware. But in the meantime, if they refresh, it should come right back up.
Okay, and I apologize in advance for that. And I apologize currently for that. So your current status and any other future problems, hopefully we can rectify that. So when we look at, how we, what were our goals in this budget? So our goals in this budget and our goals going forward are we need to repurpose any resources we have. We have to take a look at that through the lens of the 3 pillars. We have to realize that the academic, social, and emotional needs of our students are paramount now more than ever. We have to maintain and build the collective capacity of staff. So, when you look at what staff has done since March 13th, and really changed the delivery of education in a revolutionary way, and literally made that turnaround in 24 hours, and then continued to build their skills throughout this. It's quite amazing. But now more than ever, we need to work with our staff to make sure that we continue to build that capacity and continue to build our capacity to deliver instruction in a variety of environments, given the uncertainty of the future of education in the world of COVID-19 and beyond. And also critically analyze how our decisions impact those pillars of academic excellence, equity, and social emotional well-being. So it is a process, and it's a process that we've begun, and it's a process that over the year of next year that we will have to continue, and we'll have to continue it with even greater dedication than we have now, if that's even possible. So we were also focusing on maintaining our staffing levels and programs for students. So we have achieved a budget this year with no loss of individuals who are currently employed. And at the same time, too, realizing that resources have been constrained severely, we have looked to minimize our staff replacement or addition. We also had a goal. We realized that, I think we're up to 40 million unemployment claims filled in the United States. A unemployment rate approaching or exceeding Great Depression levels, nearing 20% perhaps. So we have to minimize the impact on our taxpayers. And our goal was to achieve an overall impact on taxpayers, what they might actually pay of at or about zero. Let's look at the next slide. How are we going to go forward? So, as we go forward and as we look at next year, we're going to have to take a look at our obligations to the retirement system, because the retirement systems will be impacted by financial downturn. We have reserves dedicated to these, so we would have to look at how do we use these reserves strategically to stabilize and mitigate budgetary impact in the future. One of the issues is when you do that 5-year look back, you have peaks and valleys of contributions to ERS and TRS. And so the fact that the state allowed us to establish a reserve for the teachers' retirement system was a benefit last year, because that reserve can be used to smooth that out. But now more than ever, that reserve will be important. And also we have a debt service reserve. And so as time goes on, as we begin to assume more debt for the building project, it will be time to use that reserve strategically to mitigate the impact of debt service. And, as we go forward and as we do our planning throughout 2021, we have to consider, how do we redesign existing programs to accomplish long-term savings? Because we have to consider how we will do these programs with the existing staff or less staff. And, so what do we do to realize that? How do we make that happen? We have to take a look at upcoming and future plans. And again, rethink some of these plans and also reimagine previous ideas, previous plans. It's all part of gathering information. And as we gather information, be flexible, make adjustments, change, be agile as we move forward. So when we look at how did we resolve our budget deficit? So when we came into this, we had a $3.35 million budget deficit, and back by, mid-March and March, we had, worked to close that. We were, closing it. But then we got hit with some additional challenges. So how did we do this? Okay, so one lever that we will use is we will add $2.4 million of additional fund balance to our revenue side. And so that means that we are using a total of $4.8 million of fund balance in total. We are able to do that, okay, because of the in-person operations being shut down as of mid-March. The district will realize some savings, so that will allow us to meet our revenue shortfall. When we looked at our tax levy, we always, we haven't factored, we had not set a levy yet. At one time when we started this, our levy was above 2%. But we have increased our tax levy from 0, which actually represents our latest calculation for our cap, which is 0.474%. So it's less than a 0.5% increase. Another strategy too was we were going to look for some revenue. And so one starting point on revenue is we were looking to share a new E&L teacher, which we have to hire to meet state mandates. So that sharing with Manans, that is a $40,000 add to our budget here. So we had to also do this in light of the fact that we also had to deal with this $2.4 million in state aid that we could possibly be losing throughout the school year. So if you can see, the fund balance is the offset. Next slide, please. So then we went about modifying our expenditures, and we did do some adds, and we did some decreasing as well. So we use bond anticipatory notes to do short-term borrowing. They're optional. We opted to not pay $920,000 on that principal. That impacted our tax cap. It brought it down. But that was money that was taken out of the expenditure side. We are looking at equipment and technology. So we used two strategies there. Some of the equipment requests we felt we could defer until the next year. And approximately $500,000 of our technology requests with our savings, we are going to buy those ahead. So that will reduce what we are purchasing for next year. We also felt, though, too, is that we have unanticipated costs related to COVID reopening. So we budgeted $500,000 in those costs. Those costs could be for additional custodial services. We could also use them for additional cleaning equipment, for additional staff to meet students' educational needs, mental health needs, for a variety of the additional costs that we figure we will have to meet as a result of COVID-19. We did a reduction of $250,000 in non-instructional extra compensation, so that's overtime and substitutes. And we are not having the driver education or continuing education programs next year. I think we are going to postpone. If we could go back, thank you. Yeah, we could go back. We're going to postpone or not open continuing education for a year. There's concern here that opening the buildings at night adds additional people into the building, puts a stress on cleaning. So that would be a decrease of about $10,000. But the custodial time was estimated to be about 1.5 full-time equivalent custodians to do the additional cleaning required by these programs. So we are not reducing custodians by 1.5, but actually we are gaining the benefit of perhaps 1.5 additional custodians to do some of that additional cleaning without having to hire new custodians at this time. So when we take a look at this, and this leads us to the staffing part here. So there were some staffing requests that were removed from the budget. So we removed 4 full-time cleaners and a grounds person. That's a $240,000 decrease from our original budget. And then, these represent the staffing reductions through attrition. So we eliminated 2 administrative positions due to retirement, 3.6 full-time clerical positions due to retirement or resignation, 8.0 full-time educational aides due to retirement, and 9.1 full-time teaching positions due to retirement. So that's a decrease of $1.4 million. So all those positions have been, are the positions that we realized through attrition. Not a single person is losing a job at this time. We are just not replacing retirements. And we have a social worker. We have an additional social worker we hired. We want to keep all our mental health professionals in place. So when we look at those staffing positions, when we had retirements in counseling, and certainly we had our most recent hire as a social worker, we didn't even begin to think about reducing those positions. So we also have our Title IV grant. And so we use that grant to put $50,000 of a social worker salary into that grant. So that takes it away from our general fund and that is money that comes to us through federal aid. Go to the next one. We do have some new teaching positions. So I mentioned here an anticipated need of 1.0 E&L teacher. We are going to share that person with Manans. That person will have 50% of their salary offset because of needs in special education. To meet the mandates, we have to increase a full-time special education teacher, and a 0.2 full-time music teacher will be added. Now that's represented here in that fact that we had the retirement of an individual whose was 8/10 of their time was spent as a music teacher and 2/10 of their time was spent as an art teacher. We decided to replace that 0.2 art position with a 0.2 music position. So when we take a look at, our net revenue increases, all the money comes out. Our revenue was increased by $455,000. Our expenditures were reduced by $2,895,000. So that allowed us to close that gap of $3,350,000. Now, when we presented the base budget back in March, we had already included and we did not eliminate 4.0 teachers elementary enrollment driven. Okay, enrollment is increasing. That's $320,000 that we have to add. We have no choice. But that was not a part of the original $3.35 million deficit, nor was the 1.0 full-time bus driver, trainer, and dispatcher position. That was also included in our base budget. Sometimes the training of bus drivers has to be contracted out. We will not have to do this. We have someone on staff to do this. This person is a multi-talented individual who can drive, who can train other bus drivers, and who also can serve as a dispatcher as well. Look at the next slide. So this is getting deep in the weeds here, okay, but I'll go through it. So this is our proposed revenue budget. So when we take a look at it, we plan to get $88,215,013 from property taxes. That's a difference of about almost $416,000 from last year. That's a tax increase of 0.474%. Our pilots are up to $493,372. That's payment in lieu of taxes. That's a difference of about $241,000. As you can see, our foundation aid is down to $9.7 million. That's a loss of $2.4 million that we're projecting. Our building aid has gone up because of what we're doing currently with our projects. So that's at $3.6 million. That's an increase of $870,000 approximately. Our annexation aid is on its steady decline. That is the annexation we gained. We annexed Maplewood Common School District in 2008. So that's down to $571,000 approximately, a decrease of about $285,000. Our transportation aid is down slightly by $51,000 to $3.4 million. Our BOCES aid, which is an expense-based aid like transportation aid, is up to $1.486 million. That's an increase of $254,000. Our high-cost aid, these are students who are special education students who require special placements, additional staffing. That is at $834,994, an increase of about $9,000. Supplies aid, materials aid is up about $8,500 to almost $600,000, and all other aids we get from other sources has increased by about $120,000. So when we put it all together, our total state aid is at $20,593,256. That's a decrease of $1.37 million. Tuition, special education, reimbursements. The biggest chunk of this tuition payment comes from our Manans students. We have a contract with Manans. Manans is a K-8 district. Their students mostly come to Shaker High School for their high school education. So we are expecting to have 1.921 million in tuition aid. That's an increase of 34,000. Our interest earnings, as you can understand from looking at the markets, have taken a big hit. So we are estimating we're back to maybe 8 to 10 years ago, that time, in terms of what our interest earnings were. They've gone from $700,000 to $50,000, and that's a hit of about $650,000. All other revenue sources have also taken a hit to the tune of about $247,850, and that is the other revenue sources are about 1.466 million. Now, the biggest area where we've done that to make this up is to use our reserves. Said that we were going to be spending less, so our reserves will be increased as a result of our decreased spending for the last part of the year. So we are using 4.8 million to balance our budget. That's an increase of over $3 million. The TRS reserve has been bumped up to $155,000. Our ERS reserve remains at 200,000. Our compensated absences reserve is at 50,000, and our unemployment reserve gets bumped up to 35,000. So when we take a look at our total use of reserves, it's 5.24 million, and that's an increase of 3.24 million last year. So when we look at our revenues, okay, our revenues are up to $117,979,501, and that's an increase of 1.661 million, or 1.43%. So we have to present a balanced budget in the state of New York, unlike the federal government. And so now we will take a look at how we balance these are the revenues that will balance the following expenditures. So when we take a look at staff salaries, there is a dollar change of over $1 million. It's a change of minus 1.6%. We had 30 retirements within the district this year. With those retirements, these are our veteran teachers who have contributed mightily to the success of our district. And when they leave, they are hired by new teachers who we hope stay with us for the next 30, 35 years. And those new teachers, we budget them at a lower step and a lower salary increase. So that represents that, in addition to some of the reductions that we've made. Our fringe benefits, they are at $29,841,414. That's up to almost $2 million, or an increase of 7.13%. So when we look at total salary and fringe benefits, they represent $97,048,322 of our budget, an increase of $891,139, or 0.93% increase. The expenditures on textbooks are up to 491,000. That's an increase of slight increase of slightly less than $2,000. That's 0.38%. Utilities, 1.475 million, an increase of about $19,000. You can see the percentage there, 1.33. BOE services, we are relying more and more on BOCES because they are aidable. So that's over 3 million, and that's about $306,000 increase, up 11%. Special education department expenses, we figure are going to be down slightly, 1.1 million, down by about 2,000, or 0.2%, down. Maintenance and operations up 42,000 to 689,000. That's an increase of 6.2%. Diesel and gasoline, we're holding flat. Insurance up slightly by $19,000 to 380,000. And the refund of property taxes holding constant. Workers' compensation up to 105,000. And health services in other districts, 8,000 up to slightly over $250,000. Charter schools tuition up by 80,000. This is families who request to go to charter schools. Most of them come in as charter school students and come from another district, and they continue on in the charter schools. So we're budgeting 390,000. That's up 80,000, and all other departments lumped together are up 54,000 or 2.3%. So we look at that, and we look at all our contractual services. They're up 6.31% by 632,000 or 10.656 million. Our debt service has gone down slightly, as you can see, to 66,000 by 66,809. Interfund transfers up by 50,000. Equipment down by 337,000, and that's from deferring and buying ahead. Our supplies are up to 2.6 million to almost $500,000. So our total expenditure budget for this year is $117,979,501. It's an increase of $1,661,401,000, or 1.43%. So I apologize in advance for reading through this, but I just wanted to go through it detail by detail. And if anybody has any questions, certainly they can enter them send them to communications. And if we don't answer them at this meeting, then we certainly will be answering them shortly thereafter. So now we go to the property tax cap calculation, and for this I will turn it over to Mr. Hoot to explain this to you.
Thanks, Mr. Corr. There's a number of factors I will go through on this calculation. The first factor is in the middle of the page labeled the allowable levy growth factor. The property tax cap came out and was known as the 2% property tax cap. Sometimes it's not 2%. And in this case this year, it is not 2%. It is under 2%, 1.81. So the CPI dictates that, and we have seen a number of times throughout recent years where the factor has been less than 2%. The other percentage factor is the second line, the tax base growth factor. When districts have growth in their real property values, the Real Property Services Department will assign a factor to that, which allows a modification in your tax cap formula. Many districts do not have growth factors at all. In our case, it is remains somewhat constant over the years, somewhere in that 1.25% to 1.5% on an annual basis. Another modifying factor, as Mr. Corr mentioned, in the revenue budget, pilots, payment in lieu of tax agreements, those are modifications in the formula. And as was indicated on the revenue budget, the prior year was $252,000. We're anticipating $493,000 in the coming year. And lastly, the two biggest modifications relate to the capital exclusion. And the capital exclusion takes into account your debt service payments. In our case, school bus purchases, because they are included in our general fund budget and are not financed. The aid associated with the purchase of those school buses and the aid associated with the building projects. You net out those numbers, and in the prior year, it was about $4.1 million, and in the coming year, it's about $2.1 million. Bottom line, you come back to, as Mr. Corr indicated earlier, a 0.474% tax cap for this upcoming 2021 school year.
So the tax increase is less than 0.5%. I believe in my 40 years in the school district, this is the lowest tax increase we've had. I don't remember one lower than that. I could be proven wrong by that, but it is the lowest percentage increase that we've had as a district. Can we look at the next slide, please? So I think what we should know this year is that, we are voting in an unusual environment. Essentially, basically, we are voting by absentee ballot. So this budget vote will take place on June 9, 2020, exclusively by absentee ballot, and that's per executive order by Governor Cuomo, and that was issued May 1, 2020. A qualified voter in North County for our school district vote is any individual who is a U.S. citizen, who's 18 years old or older, and who has lived in our district for at least 30 days prior to the vote. And so we will automatically mail to all individuals who have voted on a school district matter within the last 5 years. And if you have not received a ballot or you have not voted within the last 5 years and you are qualified, by that we mean you're a U.S. citizen, you're 18 years of age and have lived in the district for 30 years, you can contact our district clerk, Ms. Jane Dawson, by email. And the email is districtclerk@ncounty.org. We will have that on our website. It will be broadcast loud and clear. You can also call 518-785-8591, extension 3126. Leave your request. Okay, there will be specific instructions provided for that request, and we will be sending you an absentee ballot. Let's go to the next slide. So when we look at, what did we accomplish in this year's budget? So we did use attrition, and we gained this attrition through retirements and resignations, and we did eliminate 12.7 positions. So I'm not, celebrating the elimination of 12.7 positions, but I am proud of the fact that there is not an individual who will lose a job in North County. And we state that we believe in our people and we believe in the power of our people to deliver the service of education. And I'm happy that we had the good fortune of circumstances to allow us to do that. We also utilize savings from this year's current closure to increase the fund balance at the end of the year. So we are utilizing this savings. We're offsetting our expenditures, reducing our tax impact to that less than 0.5%. And this is our rainy day fund. So we did use that when it is a deluge. We also sought additional revenue sources through shared services and grants. And so, we were working collaboratively with our good neighbors in Manans to share services. And we mentioned E&L, but we're also exploring other options with sharing of special education services in occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech, and so on. And we gathered information, we made adjustments as needed. That is going to be the modus operandi as we go forward. If you take a look at the next slide here, we looked at minimizing the tax rate. We accomplished that. So we are at or near zero with the tax rate. But when we look at the actual impact of what an individual homeowner might be paying in taxes, we are very confident in saying that it will be a zero impact or less. This is predicated on the fact that we have received, it may be a generous estimate of assessment growth, but assessment growth was estimated at 1.7. So say we get 1% assessment growth. If we get 1% assessment growth, that means that the tax impact could be a negative 0.5% even. So I think that's important to note as well. We have maintained our broad range of instructional programs. So We have all, we have our offerings in art, in music, in CTE. We have support services for students who need them, who struggle or need help in mathematics, for students who need help in reading. We have our special education supports in place. We have actually added to meet mandates. We have our ENL supports in place, our English as a new language supports in place. We've added to meet a demand there. We have maintained our mental health support for our students, and we're proud of that. We have maintained our programs at the elementary level for students who need enrichment and support in that area as well. So that is part of our budget that we feel positive about. At this point in time too, we've maintained our extracurricular offerings in all athletics for our students. So we do have a comprehensive program of extracurricular and athletics. And, we hope that our conditions improve and that, we are able to offer those programs, but we do have the capacity to offer them. And we realize the importance of that in educating the entire child. I come back to this again, we did reduce positions through attrition, but not laying off staff. So this represents what we have done in this year's budget. So now, I'd just like to conclude here with, this is our budget meeting schedule. So tonight's meeting was where we did staffing. We looked at new programs, enrollment, property tax report card, and approval of schedules. On the 18th, we'll formally adopt our proposed budget. On the 28th, we will host our budget hearing, and that will be a public forum on the budget. And you can meet our candidates. And then by absentee ballot, we will be voting on June 9, 2020. So that is our schedule going forward. And if we can post up the last slide. And, we will, individuals who are watching can get themselves a beverage or whatever. We'll give people a chance to enter their questions. And here is how you do that. Questions or comments. Are there any questions or comments from the Board of Education? I know our Board of Education has been involved in the budget process all throughout the year in their committee meetings, and this actually is the culmination of that process through their active involvement. So
we also discussed this budget earlier in the week, and we looked at everything very thoroughly, and so that's where we are. I really don't know if this is the place to say it, but we are really grateful for all the work that you and our central office team have done on this budget. It was a priority of the boards, and I know it's a priority of the central office team. We did not want to gut any programs. We wanted to maintain our extracurricular activities, our athletics, our music and art programs, our support programs. And, you were able to do that. And I was confident, we were all confident you could do that. We were all optimistic that you could do that. And again, you've come through again. And so the board, as we said the other night, we're very grateful for this budget and for all that you've done to make it work for us under extraordinary circumstances. So.
Might I add to that? This is officially like our last budget committee meeting before we adopt the budget. So I'd like to take a minute to thank our student representatives, our parent representatives, our teachers, our staff, our administrators, for all of their help in formulating this with the central office team. We appreciate your participation and always your support. I also would like to say, just as amazing as our teachers have been in stepping up to this change that came from nowhere, so too have you, our central office administrators, at breakneck speed. You have done a tremendous job at closing that gap that we took our breaths away, really, when we heard the news. And you did it with a spirit of optimism, as you do everything. As our teachers are optimistic, so too are you, and we appreciate that. You and at a minimal uh, affect to our students, we are maintaining academic programs, support programs. We're coming out with a tax impact that hopefully will be acceptable to our community. So on behalf of the budget chairs, we also wish to thank you. And we also wish to thank our fellow board members who have been very supportive and helpful throughout this process.
And also thanks to Mrs. Nardolillo and Mr. Vondell for co-chairing the budget process.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure. Do we have questions from our community?
Yes, we've received a number of questions so
Wonderful.
far, and they keep coming in. And we also have a comment that we'll share after the question portion. Before I do that, I will say we know there were some technical difficulties, as Ms. Skeels alluded to. We'll have the complete video link to this sent in Superintendent Corr's letter to families tomorrow. That will be uninterrupted, but it turns out YouTube actually went down, so it wasn't it wasn't on us. It was the provider. But the first question that we received was, can you give more specifics about the nature of the savings realized by not having the school buildings open? Specifically, was it due to not paying people that we would have otherwise paid? And also, was it realized by not doing maintenance that would have normally taken place?
Mr. Hoot, do you want to take that one?
Sure. So it's really scattered about in a number of areas, and I think the questioner hit on most of the areas that it relates to. Certainly, when you think of transportation, with the exception of using buses in our food service delivery program, they have remained idle during this period, therefore reducing fuel expenses. Certain staff members in all departments, part-time substitutes, per diems. So there's a number of, there's a lot of expense associated with payroll that was not expended during this period. Certainly the supplies and contractual budgets were impacted positively, as you're just not, when you're not operating school in a normal fashion, there are many expenses in those areas that simply, you know, are not expended.
I'd just like to note here that we have paid our employees during this layoff time. That we did pay our employees during this time. So I'll leave it at that.
Another question that we received was, which programs are impacted by not replacing staff members through attrition?
Ms. Skeels, you want to make some comments there?
Sure. So although we will have a reduction in staff, that 12.7 represents both instructional and non-instructional positions. And in each of the cases where we were reducing instructional positions, we were able to combine and look at some of our section numbers and our electives so that we are able to offer all of the courses that we were previously offering. We have just changed the way that we're delivering those services by looking at our classes, our class size. It does not go up, and we are able to manage that without actually reducing any programs or any offerings to students.
The next question is, are there any anticipated openings on the Board of Education for the 2021 school year?
Yes, there are 2 openings. Mrs. Linda Harrison has decided to run for her seat, and Mr. Sam Johnson has declared for the seat that will be vacated by Mr. David Gaynor.
And the last question that we've received, and we also have a comment to read after that, refers to the mailing of absentee ballots. So if we can provide some clarification on when individuals will begin to receive absentee ballots in the mail.
Mr. Hoot, do you want to comment on when the mailing will occur?
I will try, and the district clerk can also help with some time
Ms. Dawson
frames
is
here as well.
Yep.
So she can correct anything that I may misspeak on, but we're working, all districts are working at breakneck speed to accommodate the absentee ballots. And once the budget is adopted on Monday, then we can fill in the blanks and get things to the printer with what is articulated as, I believe, a 2 or 3 day turnaround, then off to mailing. So I would anticipate sometime in the week following if the printers are able to maintain the projected timeframes.
I would say that's correct.
Okay, so far, unless we get any other questions, that does it for the questions that we've received, but we did receive a comment that I will read. It says that I would just like to thank the North Colonie administrators, teachers, staff, and school board for working through such a trying period and remaining a positive force for the entire community. I also want to thank the administrators and the Board of Education for doing the best they can to put together a budget when there are no concrete numbers or facts to work with this year. You are a wonderful group of people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's very nice.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I just wanted to mention something. There are board candidate profiles on the North Colonie website for anyone who is interested in checking those out.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks to our Board of Education. It's a pleasure working with you. I want to thank our administrative team, our entire staff. I want to thank our budget committee, our community budget committee.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to thank all our community out there who are watching tonight and who have shown the interest to become involved in a very important component of our civic life, and that is the education of our children. So again, thanks to all.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thanks to Jane too down there.
Thank you to our technical crew for their efforts through this virtual meeting process.
I'd like to get filters.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening, everyone.
Okay, we're going to turn it back to you, Mrs. Harrison.
Yes, we are. I would like to take a motion to leave budget and adjourn. And you know what? I have to my screen.
We have Ms. Nardolillo as in a motion.
So moved.
And we need a second, I believe.
Linda,
I'll second it, but Linda, you're muted.
yes.
There you go.
All right, good. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Night, everybody.
Night,
Night
thank
all.
you.
Thank you all.
Good night.